Hello and welcome to Draft to Digital Spotlight. This is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. You can also call me Mark2Digital, and I am delighted to have with me in studio Robert J. Sawyer. Rob, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, Mark. Good to see you, my friend.
I'm really excited to get to talk to you about your new book, and I've got some images because I know you've got two different covers, and I'm excited to talk about that. But for anyone who's not familiar with you, let's go back to when you first got into writing. How did you get into writing? And give us a bit of that backstory for us.
Sure. I've been a novelist now for 30 years, since 1990, but I've been a professional writer since 1980. I spent my first 10 years as a magazine freelance writer in business, personal finance, the computing revolution, which was a big thing during the 1980s. All of that was, it was ephemeral. There's absolutely no point in reading a personal finance article from 40 years ago. And B, the computing stuff is utterly obsolete as well. I had a yearning to do something that was a little more permanent. I always wanted to do science fiction. I grew up in the 1960s, the original Star Trek and the original Apollo moon missions were in my first decade of life. So the combination of that science fiction vision and the reality looking like it was going to be in space for my generation was irresistible. That drew me to science fiction. And I made a transition in the 90s from being a freelance, as I say, magazine journalist, some newspaper work, and also lots of corporate and government newsletter speeches into full-time writing of novels. And it's gone great. 24 books, the Oppenheimer Alternatives number 24, plus 3 short story collections. I couldn't be happier.
That is awesome. Now, I want to go back to this because I think you were one of the first full-time writers I ever had the privilege of getting to know relatively well. And so this was all traditionally published back in the 90s. I think the Terminal Experiment was the first. Was it the first breakaway hit because of the Nebula Award? Or?
Exactly. It won the Nebula, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America's award for Best Novel of the Year, voted by the professionals. So that makes it the counterpart of the Academy Award in the science fiction field. I've also won the Hugo, which is the People's Choice counterpart. But the Nebula, that was my 6th novel, and it was my breakout for sure. In 1995, it was published, won the award. Awards given the following year, 96. And that changed everything overnight. But it was, as you say, all traditional publishing. That's not to say there weren't options back then, but we used this very pejorative term of vanity press. You could pay any commercial printer, or you could hire one of these services that infested the pages of Writer's Digest magazine with their come on ads. And you'd end up with a basement full of books and no way to distribute them. No way. In the 80s, certainly, 90s. That's all changed. It's changed so much that we can talk about new paradigms. But my first 23 novels were entirely traditionally published. This 24th is a self-directed hybrid. I have an American traditional print publisher. I have a Canadian traditional print publisher. And I retained worldwide print rights outside of North America, and worldwide, including North America, audiobook and ebook rights, and have been exploiting those myself.
Now, that is absolutely phenomenal. It's the kind of, in my mind, it's the dream for a writer, because with print distribution, the publishers, they own that market. That's their stomping grounds. That's what they do really, really well. But authors themselves are quite a bit more adept doing the ebooks. So with your, let's go back to your previous novel. So Quantum Night came out a couple of years ago.
If you can believe it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah,
a few years ago. But that was a split right? Because I think there's a sort of progression.
Canada in the U.S. I did 6 books where I split the rights between various publishers in the United States and Penguin Random House Canada. A name that will live forever in Canadian publishing history, good or bad, was David Davidar, who was the publisher of Penguin Canada before the merger with Random House. Big, handsome man who had come to Canada from India, where he had been publisher of Penguin India. And it turned it, English is not the first language for a lot of people, but he nonetheless turned it into a publishing juggernaut. They brought him to Canada to try and beef up Penguin Canada, and he went looking for splashy acquisitions. And he said to me, he took me out to lunch, wined me and dined me, except I don't drink wine or alcohol. But he said, look, there's no reason why you should be published in the States. You're a national treasure. Why aren't you with us here in Canada? And so we went, and what we had to do was sell the Canadian rights first, because no U.S. publisher would listen when we say, well, we want to reserve Canadian rights. They always want us as a throw-in, as a little extra morsel. But when we go to the table and say, well, those are off the table, you can't have them, Penguin Canada has them, then they'll still play ball with you. And I had, as I say, 6 books that the American publisher was happy to only get U.S. print rights to. So that worked reasonably well. But I got to say, David left. He was in line to become, president of Penguin Random House Worldwide, the role that Marcus Stoll has right now. But Me Too, before there was even a hashtag Me Too, and David was gone. And you talk about being orphaned when you're left behind with no editor at the publishing house. In a way, I was orphaned when the publisher, the top dog, left, and Penguin really wasn't committed to having genre fiction at all in their list. Science fiction, mystery, romance, thriller. Nobody in Canada does Western, and horror, your field, Mark, horror. They still thought of themselves as the most literary of publishers, regardless of the virtue of those genre books, some of which are very fine literature, including, I like to argue, my own. But yeah, it was an uneasy alliance. And when it came time to do this book, I thought, things have changed, right? I did that alliance with Penguin Random House Canada. 2007, the deal was consummated. That's 13 years. Right. 2009, the first book came out. 2016, that's 4 years ago now, the last book came out. In the interim, the infrastructure, such as Draft2Digital, which I use, for instance, has become so much better for authors to take control. And in that same 4-year period, the big 5 commercial publishers, the titans of New York City, all decided, despite what you said, you were 100% correct, their only real skill is in bookstore distribution. But they said, no, we want ebook rights, which they've been saying for over a decade. And then they started, we want audiobook rights too. No additional advance, not a penny more for the author, but we want more and more rights for the same money. So I had to leave the big 5. I'm with very respected publishers in Canada, Fitzhenry and Whiteside, which has a raft of Governor General Awards winners, which is the top literary award in Canada. And in the United States, it's an imprint that probably isn't as well known as it should be, but it's Arc Manor. I'm under their Kasich Books imprint. They just did the new Found Robert Heinlein novel, The Pursuit of the Pankara. They're Harry Turtledove's and Robert Silverberg's publisher now, and they're my publisher now, and they've got full bookstore distribution. It was the smaller guys who were willing to play ball on the separation of rights. You do you, and I'll do me, and they were willing to agree to that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, is that why there's 2 different covers? Now, I'm just going to pop up for people who are watching this. I'm going to pop up 2 different covers. I've put them up on the screen.
Yeah. That's right. So on the left, what you've got there, the yellow cover, that's the Canadian cover. And on the right, that's the American cover. Okay. The American cover was done first. That's a portrait of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the main character, and an Orion nuclear pulse propelled spacecraft next to him. The spaceship makes it seem very science fictional. So does the star field in the background. It's hard to tell, but that's the planet Mars at the top above Oppie's head. Okay. And my Canadian publisher said, no, we want a mainstream look. You sell really well to the mainstream in Canada, which I do. Yeah. We want something completely different. So we got a company in Red Deer, Bibliofic Designs, Red Deer, Alberta. Avery Olive was the designer, and she just started over from square one. And she and I batted around ideas. She did tons of different designs, and finally, very much guided by what mainstream literary bestsellers look like on both sides of the border, we came up with the yellow cover.
It's fantastic. So what I admire about the two different covers is there's a consistency in brand, right? So a fan is going to know.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'll just show very briefly, I got the two books right here, of course, is that Avery went for the same typeface for my name, right?
Yeah.
Across the border, you can still see it's a Robert J. Sawyer book. That's our consistent branding. And yeah, you know, we have a brand, philosophically rich, optimistic, hard science fiction, but with science explained so clearly that any reader can understand it, whether or not they have a PhD in astrophysics. Right? That's my brand. And
it is your brand, yeah, for sure.
It served me well for 30 years now. So I'm not changing. I'm not off brand with this yellow cover. It's that kind of book. But I've firmly believed, and I know you as a horror writer firmly believe this, your audience isn't limited to those who go to the horror section of the bookstore and might subscribe to a online service like Shudder that's just horror movies. Your brand is, as Stephen King amply proved, everybody enjoys a good scare if it's wrapped up in a good story. It doesn't have to be ghettoized.
Well, I mean, with you, my history as a bookseller, physically handing books and putting them in customers' hands, it was a shoo-in. Anytime somebody said, I do not like science fiction, I would take one of 20 odd Robert J. Sawyer books, and I would put it in their hand, and I would say, for example, I'll go as a rollback as an example. I said, do you like The Time Traveler's Wife? Well, yes, it was a beautiful love story. I said, that's exactly what rollback is.
And mine came out first. I love Audrey Hepburner's book, Time Traveler's Wife, one of my favorite novels. But I was there first, Audrey. I'm just telling you.
but again, what I like
in the works based on rollback, just very, very brief. Sony Pictures Television in Los Angeles. They commissioned Anne Kofeld Saunders, who is one of the writers on Star Trek Discovery, was the #2 writer on The Boys, was one of the writers on Timeless. And she's absolutely fabulous. The pilot script is terrific. They're shopping it to directors. Of course, everything is in stasis right now because of COVID-19. You can't film on location. You can't do anything, right? Can't bring a crew of 150 people into a studio. Everything is shut down. But we're very confident that one's going to move ahead. We've got such great people behind it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. Well, that kind of leads to something I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is, so FlashForward was a science fiction novel that was written, and then was it 10 years later that it got made?
10 years from the point I wrote it, it was out, to the point that it was on the air. And so everybody, this is a good advice for people who are beginning their publishing career. First, they think Hollywood is going to come calling. Probably not. Second, they think, well, almost instantly the movie will be in theaters. Not unless your name is Michael Crichton, Stephen King, or J.K. Rowling. It's going to be a long gestational process. 10 years is not at all atypical. We have here in Toronto in development an adaptation of Wake, Watch, and Wonder, the first books I did under my Canadian deal with Penguin Random House Canada. Well, the first of those came out 11 years ago, and the earliest we would be on is next year, so 12 years. It's a long, drawn-out process. I had hair when FlashForward came out.
I think we both did. But you've had so many options. I know triggers as well.
Almost everything has been under option. The only ones that haven't really, sometimes the second and third in a trilogy, they just option the first, knowing that you can't do anything with the second and the third. So yeah, options, film options, where they pay you a sum of money. It's 4 or 5 figures that they will pay you to not hold on to the rights, for you to promise for a period of time, it's usually a year, not to sell those rights to somebody else. And you're saying, okay, I'm taking off the markup. You got to compensate me. Write me a little check. And they then know that if they go and show it to people in Hollywood, A, they can say, well, yeah, we've got the rights, right? Don't worry, that's in the bag. And B, they know that I'm not or somebody else isn't shopping the same property. So yeah, options, right, going back to my very first novel, Golden Fleece, I've always had options. And they're nice. They're a good secondary source of income for a writer. Now, that said, the only books that get optioned are ones that can pass what's either called the elevator pitch test or the log line test. The log line is literally the single line description of a novel that's written in the log book of the person who keeps track of what's under submission. So if you can't summarize, you held up rollback. An elderly couple is offered rejuvenation, and it only works for one of them. If you can't do that with your book, and you go, oh, wow, that's kind of intriguing. Tell me more, right? If you can't do that with your book, you're dead in the water as far as Hollywood is concerned. You may be able very easily to sell the book. I think one of my finest novels is Factoring Humanity, but it is very difficult to summarize that one in less than 15 sentences.
Right.
Great book, but it's one of my few that's never been optioned, and that's exactly the reason why.
Well, and that's one of the books where, for the very, very first time, I actually understood the concept of a tesseract, because you explained it in such clear English for a non-sciencey kind of guy like me, and I went, "Oh my God, now I get it."
Yes,
not the tesseract that you see in the Avengers movies or any of that stuff, but the actual concept. That's right. So, and I love that you make science so approachable, and most of your novels that. They seem to be near real time, where you've taken concepts. For example, you talked about Wake, Watch, Wonder. And the concept there was based on cutting edge, what's going on with AI and all that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not a scientist. And the only science I studied post-secondarily was psychology as kind of a minor at university. But I'm as big a fan of science as some other people are of sports. And unlike the average sports fan, who is terrible about making anybody else understand why rugby is remotely interesting, I love being able to say, no, let me explain it to you. This will blow your mind. An electron or a positron is just an electron moving backwards in time. We have time travel. It actually happens all the time. Wow. And then here are the ramifications. I love being that cheerleader. I will, I'm way too old now anyways. Great scientists, great theoreticians always make their breakthroughs in their 20s, right? I'm way too old to ever contribute to science. But great science communicators, I have some friends who are terrific ones. Some are scientists. I'm friends with Neil deGrasse Tyson, wonderful guy. Some are not. I'm friends with Bob McDonald, host here in Canada of our national weekly science show, Quirks and Quarks, on CBC Radio. Bob has a high school education and a raft of honorary doctorates for his work as a science communicator, right? You don't have to be a scientist. You just have to love to learn, as the person who's going to communicate it, to really listen to what the scientists are saying and not let them get away with jargon, right? If they can't explain their idea simply, it's usually because their idea is not well formulated. This is one of my friends, a great physicist, Lee Smolin, who gave a lovely cover blurb for the Oppenheimer alternative. He's best known for writing The Trouble with Physics, international bestseller. So I loved it, the Oppenheimer alternative. But Lee's big critique of string theory is that no matter what questions you ask the guys, they kind of wave their hands, right? The proponents of it, they don't have testable predictions. They don't really know what it is. And if you can't answer simple questions, then your theory shouldn't stand. Well, the same thing goes as a science fiction writer. If I can't I don't care what it is, relativity, time travel, genetic manipulation, CRISPR technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, if I can't make that clear to you, I shouldn't be writing these books. It's my job. And I owe it to you, the reader, who's giving me, as my friend Spider Robinson, I'm doing a lot of name dropping here, other science fiction writer always says, I'm competing for your beer money. You could buy beer or you could buy my book. So I got to give you at least as much enjoyment and as little work as it takes to pop a beer can open and enjoy yourself that way.
Well, as a craft beer lover who's always looking for the next great craft beer, I gladly give up a craft beer, and I pre-ordered Oppenheimer Effect. I actually pre-ordered the print book from local bookshop here in Waterloo, but then I also pre-ordered the ebook because I'll read the ebook, but I'm going to hang on to that precious hard copy.
Yeah, and it's the typesetting is beautiful. I have the finished book. It's beautiful. And I love having print books, but I do almost all my reading. And for a long time now, I was an ebook reader before there was a Kindle. That's how far back I go with this technology.
Well, you had a collection of like 30 odd ebook
readers.
Yes,
and if you just put my name, Robert J. Sawyer ebooks, into YouTube, it's now a dozen years old, but you will find my survey of what was then the leading technology, including things that were launched with great promise, like the Barnes & Noble Nook, and now is completely on life support, right? Yeah. No offense to any Barnes & Noble Nook owners, it's good hardware, but Barnes & Noble lost over $1 billion with a B dollars on their foray into e-publishing. Amazon is the clear winner in the United States. Kobo, you used to work for Kobo, the clear winner here in Canada and good parts of the rest of the world. Apple Books, a very serious player. Doesn't matter who you use. Draft2Digital lets you publish to all of them, which is one of the great joys of having, your platform, Mark, is a one-stop shop for those of us who want to make it easy dealing with all these people.
Well, let's talk about that. So what you've done is, you sold print book rights. Now, for previous books, I know you did sell the ebook rights in North America, but you have the ebook rights in Canada and the US as well?
I have ebook rights throughout the world for the Oppenheimer alternative. That's
fantastic.
Correct. First time I've ever controlled ebook rights for frontlist, new books. Excuse me.
So I remember with Quantum Night, which was your previous release that Penguin Random House bought in Canada and in the US, they had the ebook rights, but you used split rights. So when you published through places like Draft2Digital, you were able to go in and say, no, I don't have the rights in Canada or the US, so publish it everywhere but there.
Right. But I'll tell you, you're absolutely right. I had the ebook rights to Quantum Night, but didn't have the two richest territories from my point of view. One is everybody's richest territory, the United States of America.
Right.
And the other one, for me as a Canadian, where I sell disproportionately well, is Canada. I didn't have ebook rights for those territories. I did for the rest of the world.
Right.
But I was just looking at my dashboard on Kindle Direct Publishing. So this is just KDP. This is just orders that are available through Amazon worldwide. But with just without North America on Quantum Night, the total pre-orders before the book actually dropped was 36 copies. We're standing now at the total Amazon pre-orders about 1,600 copies on Oppenheimer Alternative. And I haven't even sent out the newsletter yet to my mailing list telling people it's available for pre-order, right? So the difference in having Canada and the US is, and just hopefully me doing the marketing instead of my publisher doing the marketing. So the thing is, Mark, you know this very well. The traditional print publishers want the ebook rights, but they don't want the ebook to succeed. They want it to fail. They want it to not, they feel, cannibalize the print copies. So they do everything they can, including when Quantum Night, why only 36 pre-orders? Because the pre-order price was $18.99 US for an ebook. An ebook. Unbelievable, right? Who wants to pay that for an ebook? And the irony is, so Quantum Night was a $25 US hardcover. And for that matter, so is Oppie is, I think it's $23 US in trade paperback. So even on a hardcover, $25 US hardcover, my royalty was $2.50. On an ebook of that same thing that I sell for $5, my royalty is $3.50, right? The customer is out way, way more. And the publisher is making the print publisher, 3 times as much on an ebook. Where's my 3 right there? Where's the camera? 3 times as much. There's the Vulcan salute too. 3 times as much as I'm making on an ebook, as if they did all that work pressing send, right? And I'm making more at low-cost ebooks per reader, per copy, and getting more readers because people are happy to pay $4.99 is the pre-order price on Oppie US, goes to $6.99 on Pub. They're happy to pay that little for a new title by one of their quote-unquote favorite authors. And I get a bigger slice of the pie than I've ever gotten before. For my readers and me, it's win-win. For the print publisher, the part of the market that wants print books, serious collectors, those who want a physical autograph, those who like to read that way, those who like them on their shelf. I've got tons over here on my shelf of various other people's books. Libraries, let them have that market. And I understand their great expenses serving that market. But at 10%, it's barely getting my beak wet on the transaction on print books, right?
This is fantastic. I love that. I love how collaborative. You're working with smaller publishers are probably a lot more adept, a lot more willing to cooperate with you in such ways that they know you're going to do the ebook, they're going to handle the print book, etc. Now, you also cooperate.
Well, I'll give you an example, if I can just give you one quick example.
Yeah, please.
My U.S. publisher said, well, we're reasonably small and so forth, but we want to advertise in Locus, which is the trade journal, the U.S. trade journal, the science fiction fantasy field, as you well know. We want to take out a half-page ad, which is more than I've ever gotten from my print publisher. Print publisher always takes out a whole-page ad, but divides it over their 6 titles for the month, right? Or 8 was Tor. It's like, here's our whole list near a little tiny corner. Take out a half page just for Oppie and the top banner on the Locus website main page for the month of June. Would you split the cost with me if I wanted to do that? And he said, I can get a better rate than you can get because I'll go to them and I'll buy the banner every month for the year, for my publishing company for several months. Right. And I buy a lot of print ads. We get a better rate than you could get. But would you split the cost? Because it's going to drive ebook sales as much as it's going to drive print. And I said, sure. I'm getting a bargain. He's getting a bargain. We do this back and forth, very friendly. And I go straight to the top dog, the publisher. I don't have to say to my editor. And I used to. I was with Tor, which is a giant part. Well, it's a medium-sized part of a giant conglomerate, Macmillan. And I would say to David Hartwell, the late great David Hartwell, my editor, why don't we try this? And he said, well, I don't know what marketing's going to think of it. And we'll walk down the hall and ask them. Said, they don't really like it when editorial sticks their head in the door. Well, who can I speak to in marketing? Oh, no, authors can't speak to marketing, right? Unbelievable. So, yes, it's collaborative now with both my Canadian and my American small press, but respected press, print publishers. Absolutely.
Oh, that is fantastic. Now, I love the collaboration that you do. And I want to go back to FlashForward, the ABC television series as well, because you had the experience as a scriptwriter as well as one of the executive producers or associate producers.
I was the consultant,
Consultants. So your novel has a premise, which I hope you share, but they had to, and I think this is important for writers to understand, when they adapted it into a TV series, they couldn't take the novel, they took the basic premise, but had to change some things. Can you share a little bit about that?
The novel is very easy premise. That's why it's sold. Elevator pitch, logline. Everybody on Earth blacks out for 2 minutes. Those who survived wake with visions of the future 21 years down the road. That was the novel. And the guys who adapted it, David S. Sawyer and Brandon Braga, said there are 3 things Americans won't stand for. Old people on TV, so forget this seeing people 21 years older. We're going to hire the best-looking cast in Hollywood. And we did. John Cho, Joseph Fiennes, Gabriel Union. I mean, gorgeous people. Number 2, you've got it set at this particle accelerator in Geneva, Switzerland, CERN. Americans aren't going to watch any show set anywhere but in the United States, and ideally in LA or New York or Chicago. And number 3, there was a number 3. Oh, physicists. The main characters are scientists. Americans will only watch 3 professions: doctors, lawyers, and cops. So we're going to forget your 2 minds. My scientist characters show up, but they're supporting players. The main players are a doctor who is married to a cop, and a cop who is engaged to a lawyer. So
you covered all the bases.
They covered all the bases. And still, and it was a great show, and I made a lot of money off of it, and I had a blast, and I love everybody who was involved with it. Still great friends with so many of them. So what an experience. But we lasted 22 episodes. Now, today, for Picard, the new Star Trek series, they're going to have to be into their third season before they'll hit 22, because 10 is a normal episode now for most cable series. But we were back in the day when we did 22. And I still get checks 4 times a year from the Writers Guild for script royalties and so forth.
Oh, still? Is that for like DVD sales and things like that?
DVDs and streaming services. Sometimes it's on Netflix, and they'll license it to Netflix for 6 months. And then it'll be on, Hulu. And then, these property, when something goes off of one of the services, it's because the license is expired and they've vended it to somebody else. And then they wait for there to be pent-up demand back at the first service, and they bring it back. And this is how streaming works. So it's always available streaming somewhere, and it's absolutely, you can buy it on DVD with bonus features, including me in interviews. So,
oh my God, I'm going to have to get that then. And I know you did appear in the pilot episode in the hospital.
I got a little cameo in the pilot, yeah. Made the director, and I love the director, Dave Goyer. But he was all set, and it was the network executive from ABC who's sitting there, and I'm standing, behind the booth. And she turns to Dave and says, "Why don't you put Rob in the scene? It'll look good on the DVD." And Dave's got his lighting all set, and it's all blocked. And of course, he does it. It's the network executive. So I have my little scene in the pilot. But thanks to Nay Ebong was her name, just a wonderful woman, Nay Ebong at ABC, who gave me my I didn't get in the Screen Actors Guild because I didn't have a line, but gave me my network television debut in this.
Oh, that is awesome. And I loved seeing, based on a novel by Robert J. Sawyer at the beginning of every episode.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right, now we have some questions from the live audience, so I'm going to pop up the first one. I'm going to read it aloud. So this is from Peter. Peter says, "It's about your new novel, about the impetus for this book, the Oppenheimer alternative. Were you looking to write an alternative history and came to Oppenheimer, or were you reading about him for pleasure and then got inspired?"
Oh, Pete Wolchak there, who does a wonderful blog called Collecting Trek. Good to see you online there, Pete. The answer is, a friend of mine said, "You got to go see this play at the Montreal Fringe Festival." I live in Toronto. Montreal's a little far. The inventor of all things about Leo Szilard, who was the man who first conceived of the atomic chain reaction that gave rise to nuclear fission. And I missed the play in Montreal, but I read up on the character. And that led me to the Manhattan Project and led me to Oppenheimer. And Oppenheimer was such a fascinating character, and so well, although he never wrote an autobiography, so well documented in great biographies. I have a blurb on the cover of the book from the author of the Pulitzer Prize winning biography, American Prometheus, Martin J. Sherwin, who loved my novel. It was absolutely just getting fascinated by Oppenheimer. And then the more I got into it, I realized you could not make up this character. So flawed, so tragic, so brilliant, so larger than life, right? If I had written him into a novel, people would say, "Oh, come on." But he really existed. He became an irresistible catnip for me as a novelist.
That is awesome. So actually, since we're talking about it, I know I will buy a Robert J. Sawyer novel on site, not knowing anything about it, just knowing that it's written by you, because those are the kinds of things I fall into. So what is the premise for the novel? Because we're talking, what's the log line?
Almost everybody who worked on the atomic bomb came to regret having done so. In this alternate history, they're given an opportunity to stay together as a team and save the world instead of destroy it.
Ooh, that's awesome. Well, I cannot wait to dig into that. Thank you for sharing that. That is, just for people who are interested, that's coming out in early June 2020?
June 2nd. So we're in COVID-19. Everything is a little bit crazy. June 2nd, yes, except that it's shipping in Canada from Indigo. Bacca Phoenix, the great specialty store in Toronto, is doing mail order of it right now.
Yeah.
So, bookstores, as you know, unless you were a bookseller, things arrive and you're supposed to stack them up in your back room until the official drop date. Well, who cares at this point? It's the end of the freaking world. We might as well at least have something to read, right? So it's kind of sort of out already, but because of, the way you pre-order things on Amazon, the ebook will drop June 2nd and the audiobook June 2nd.
So I mean, because I actually did my special order. I think I saw that you posted something, probably a picture of you holding the book. I went, oh my God, I haven't pre-ordered this yet. So I pre-ordered the Kobo. And then this morning I went online to Wordsworth Books here in Waterloo, independent bookstore, and I ordered the print copy. So I might get the print copy before June. That's exciting.
Absolutely. That's right. No, for sure you will. Yeah. I mean, I finally decided, as much as I collaborate, my Canadian publisher has not sent me my author's copies yet. So this was delivered on Friday from indigo.ca. I had to buy my own damn book. I had to buy 2 of them in order to qualify for free shipping.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I'm not going to pay for shipping, damn it. At least not from Indigo, from an independent, of course. They got to make their money. And independence. I worked at Bacca Phoenix. You worked at the McMaster University bookstore. We know. And the store you haven't named is Wordsworth Books in Waterloo, Ontario, Kitchener-Waterloo, where you ordered your copy from, I believe. Yeah. We know how important the ecosystem of independent bookstores is, because they're the ones, not the chains. They're the ones that do the word-of-mouth hand selling. They're the ones that build our audience, and we love and adore them.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Could not say that better myself, even if I stole the words from you. I'm going to pop up another question from VJ. Said, we authors read a lot of books in our genres and try to get some plot points out of them. Do you consider it as illegal or plagiarism?
Hey, VJ, nice to see you there. So I asked a producer in Hollywood who seemed quite conversant with science fiction and makes a lot of science fiction shows. I won't name him. Oh, you read a lot of science fiction. I said, yes. So what do you get from it? Ideas, right? Which he steals, right? Every writer learns by reading other writers, and hopefully other writers that are better than them or more experienced than them. You've got to read voraciously. Plot points, I don't know. You don't want to steal any particular line of dialogue or beautiful bit of description or somebody's clever twist ending from somebody else. But we all learned our basic structure either through osmosis by reading tons of novels, way before Sid Field, who is the great screenwriting guru, articulated the 3-act structure for scripts. That structure existed organically. Beginning, that's about a quarter of the movie. Middle, where everything kind of escalates for half the movie, and a conclusion that takes the final quarter. He didn't invent it. He extracted it from the work that already existed. And you learn to plot. You learn how to do cliffhangers. You learn how to do character growth. You learn how to do dialogue by reading voraciously in and out of your genre. Right now, I'm reading a mainstream novel called The Immortalists, for instance, which was a big New York Times bestseller. And I also have on the go Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which has got beautiful, almost no plot to speak of and no conflict. Everybody says conflict is, what fiction is all about. Well, what's the conflict? Well, these girls really love each other as sisters and they're going to support each other in everything they do. Conflict. No, there's not. But you learn a lot by reading. So VJ, go ahead. Now, I have a lawyer in New York, a lawyer in Los Angeles, a lawyer in Toronto, so don't go too far. But go ahead.
That's awesome. Thank you. To pop up this comment, Guy says, Robert's a great guest, fun and enthusiastic. Thank you. And Jamie says, I agree. And I agree
with the winky emoji I saw there.
So I want to go to pop up your website for a second. So SFWriter.com, very strategic approach, because branding is really critically important. And so let's talk a little bit about your website and part of your brand as an expert on science, even though you've admitted that you are not a scientist.
Sure. My website is 25 years old now. It's older than Amazon.com. I was the first science fiction writer in the world to have a website and the first Canadian writer of any type to have a website. And I've been very fortunate living in Canada. And you know this, Mark, our mainstream media is very kind to writers. because writers are the big stars in Canada. The movie stars and the musicians and the actors, they move to Hollywood or Graceland or wherever. They don't stay here, but the writers stay. So we get a lot of interviews. And I knew that people would listen to me on radio or see me on TV or nowadays on YouTube, and they won't remember my name. It's Robert J. Sawyer. It's banal. It's uninteresting. They won't remember it. Robert J. Sawyer. But who was that SF writer? Who was that science fiction guy? My website is SFWriter.com. That's all I ask you to remember. Science fiction writer, SF writer. And I've had it, forever. And it's so easy to remember. It's become part of my brand, so much so that for my ebook editions worldwide and the POD, print on demand editions I'm doing for the print market through Kindle Direct Publishing in the non-North American markets, the imprint, the publishing imprint, yours, of course, is Stark Publishing. Mine is SFWriter.com Inc., which is the name of my actual incorporated entity, my corporation, my Canadian corporation that I do my business under. So easy to remember, SFWriter.com. And when I say that to people, by the way, if a writer friend who, when he was getting his website, a very fine writer, John E. Stith, science fiction mystery crossovers, but he chose neverend.com because Neverend was the name of his book at that moment. But that book was 15 years ago, right? He's booked since. And so it was a mistake, I think. You should check it out, neverend.com, great writer. But it was a mistake to tie his branding into the moment rather than to the career.
That's fantastic. Now, you've always been, obviously being a guy who's always thinking about the next thing and the what if and the science. And in the last several years, the best advice that you can hear is, well, you need to get a newsletter. You need to get a mailing list.
Yeah.
And you, my friend, I remember getting, no matter what bookstore I worked at, I would get a physical copy of the newsletter from you way before it was, all the cool kids had learned about how to do this. So newsletters obviously still an important aspect of.
Yeah, I have, I have 6,000 names on my newsletter mailing list. So it's a decent size. I wish it was bigger. I was not aggressive about sign up on my website. I hate websites where as soon as you arrive, sign up for my newsletter. No, we haven't even had a cup of coffee yet. Let's find out if we like each other before we get into a relationship here, right? But I've just actually fairly recently updated my website, so every page on the site ends with, if you like this, sign up for the newsletter. But 6,000, that's it's a decent enough size. Puts me out of the cheap range of MailChimp, unfortunately.
Yeah,
because you got to be careful. I was looking at MailChimp, just parenthetically here. For 6,000, the cheapest way you can do it is by their pay-as-you-go. Okay, so pay-as-you-go works out to about 10 cents per email address per mailing. If you're doing 10 cents US, if you're doing occasional newsletters. And I only do them a couple of times a year because I get people, sometimes even from Mark, that send them out fairly frequently. And I got to say, I don't read them all, right? I want to see.
I know, it hurts my feelings.
I know, right? Not even open MailChimp will tell you, right? And I have a number of writer friends who do that. And I think, okay, you're just telling me what you told me 7 or 14 or 21 days ago.
Right.
You got something new. When I get a newsletter for some other authors, I said, I got to open this because obviously they got a new book or a new TV show or they're coming to town or whatever it is. Right. Anyways, 10 cents a mailing. If you could get a 10% conversion rate, then it's costing you $1 per sale. And I'm selling low ticket items. My profit on an ebook is $3.50. And if I'm spending $1 to get that $3.50, I've spent about a third of my income just on that. And that's a 10% conversion rate. How many people have 10% on any direct email campaign, right? If you get a 1% conversion rate, then I'm spending $10 to use MailChimp to make a $3.50 sale. Well, that makes no sense. So fortunately, my internet service provider, pair.com, offers a free mail list manager that works very well for my purposes. But newsletters, physical, I don't do them much anymore because they were quite expensive. And email were absolutely important for sure.
Awesome. Well, Rob, thank you so much. Always stimulating, fascinating conversation. I appreciate you spending the time with me. I think people know where they can find you online, right? That is
SFWriter.com. Absolutely. Please check it out. And also, if you like the Oppenheimer alternative, I'm a huge believer in DVDs and Blu-rays that have extra bonus special features. So a whole raft of them for the Oppenheimer alternative at that website.
At SFWriter.com. Thank you again, Rob. I can't wait to read the book, and thanks for sharing some insights and wisdom.
Live long and prosper, all you publishers and self-publishers out there. Bye-bye.